Hello and welcome to this Phoenix 14 News special report. You don't see them every day. You don't think about them until you need them. In fact, most people don't think about them at all, but they shine on you and me every day. Join me now as we find out what sunshine laws are all about. Now for your weather report. In North Carolina, today's weather forecast is a breezy 65 degrees under the beautiful blue North Carolina sky. Sunshine is guaranteed. Looking ahead to the 5-day forecast now, experts are expecting even more sunshine. Could this be a record? Let's take a look. Last year, the sun was shining in North Carolina 365 days straight. That's all year long. But wait a minute, that can't be right. What are we looking at? Oh, okay. Well, it turns out that what we're seeing isn't the weather, it's the law, the sunshine laws. But what's a sunshine law?
I thought they were like laws that you had to like watch the sun rise and you had to watch the sunset or else you'd be in like trouble or something.
I thought it was something about like a windows having to have a certain amount to let sunshine in or something like that.
I thought a sunshine law was where the sun had to shine.
Okay. You thought there was a law that it had to shine there?
Jackson found something on the internet that said laws that make the sun shine.
While sunshine laws are U.S. federal and state laws requiring government meetings, decisions, and records to be made available to the public. In North Carolina, we have two laws that make up our sunshine laws: the North Carolina Public Records Law and the North Carolina Open Government Law. First, let's talk about the North Carolina Open Government Law. It states that all official meetings of public bodies are open to the public. Now that's pretty straightforward if you ask me. Official meetings are open to the public, but there are some exceptions. Officials can close a meeting if the topic is someone's medical records, a juvenile is involved, or a grand jury is hearing evidence. Sounds simple enough. Sunshine laws mean that when public officials are holding meetings talking about spending the public's tax dollars, the public should be able to attend. But one North Carolina newspaper owner found that sometimes that can get sticky. Let's go see what he has to say. Mr. Boney, can you start off by just telling me a little bit about the case and what happened with your newspaper?
Well, it all started when we were covering a regular city council meeting. And the city council went into a closed session, a session when only the council members are there, except they also allowed in their attorneys, and that's allowed under North Carolina's open meetings law to consult with attorneys over legal matters. But what we didn't understand is that they also allowed into that closed session the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and he stayed for an hour and a half. It was a long meeting to be behind closed doors. And so we kept asking, why had he been allowed into the meeting? Under North Carolina law, normally only the attorneys can be present when they're meeting with their client, the city council, or any other public body, governmental body. And so we kept asking, why was he allowed to be there? They would not answer the question. They would give little one-word answers saying he was essential, he was necessary. And so I appeared before the city council twice, wrote letters to them twice, responded to the legal analysis they gave of why they thought he should be there and we thought why he shouldn't. And then, to our great surprise, one day after getting a letter that refuses to answer all the questions that we'd ask, they turned around and sued us, which is a very unusual thing, never been done before in North Carolina, sued us wanting a judge to say that they were right and legitimate to be in their closed session and that we were wrong to keep criticizing them for it.
Did it cost your newspaper a lot of money to go to court?
Oh yes. Many times the public is responsible to enforce the law that's supposed to be in its behalf. And yet that cost money. In that first case that we had, it cost us about $40,000 to litigate, and we won. We were proven right. In this last case, it was $43,000. Fortunately, the judge in this last case has agreed that the city, because it wrongly sued us in the first place, will have to reimburse us for a lot of our legal fees. That's an important principle that, in our opinion, frankly, ought to be made automatic, so that any time a citizen has to sue the government to get access to open records and open meetings, that when they're proven right, that the government ought to have to pay their legal fees. That kind of remedy will ensure that the governments will be more careful about it in the first place. When it doesn't cost them anything, they're not so careful.
Why were you willing to pay that money? Why is it so important that you went to court?
Well, the principle to us in this particular case was that no citizen in North Carolina, not an individual citizen, not a corporate or business citizen such as our newspaper, should be subject to being sued by the government because you challenge a closed meeting.
And how did that make you feel, to be sued by your own government?
It was a very eerie feeling. We came back on a Monday from having actually taken my son to school, to college, and walk into the office, to the newspaper office, and be told that the sheriff is looking for me. And the sheriff was seeking to serve me papers, the official serving of the papers saying the city of Burlington is suing you. And it just kind of sent a chill. I mean, because first of all, I didn't know why initially, but then we subsequently found out why, and then we were really perplexed because, again, this had never been done before. The idea that a city would take preemptive action or initiate action to sue a newspaper who was criticizing its closed-door proceedings had never been done before.
So why are sunshine laws important to the people of North Carolina?
Fundamentally, the importance is to have all government decision-making take place in the open. People ought to be able to know what public records are that their government is collecting or making. They need to be able to know what their legislators at the local level or in Raleigh or anywhere else are doing, how they're deciding and how they're voting, what they're voting on, the exact wording of various proposals. It's very important so that the people know what their government is doing allegedly in their behalf. And if they don't like it, they can change those elected officials at the next election.
What could be happening in meetings if we weren't able to go in?
Well, the mischief over the years is practically endless. We've had enclosed meetings in North Carolina. Boards give themselves a pay raise, decide to purchase land on behalf of the municipality without telling people that they were planning to buy the land or spend that much money. They can sometimes, there are conflicts of interest that sometimes arise in terms of whether members are doing things in their own interest individually in closed meetings. When you take away the public spotlight, you take away that safeguard that allows the people to know what their officials are doing. They might not be doing anything wrong, in which case you need to shine the light as well. Information is so powerful, and that's why those who know it often want to keep it confined to a small group. They want to be the ones to know. My dad, who was a newspaper man, used to say that if you stayed in the business long enough, those who are in power today sometime will be out of power. And when they're out of power, they'll suddenly become your best friends. They're now interested, because they're no longer in power, they're now interested that everything be open because they want to know. They're on the outside. They're not in the little club that knows what's going on. They want to know. That's really the position the public's in all along. They're on the outside, and they need to and often want to know what's going on.
What's the biggest threat to journalists today, whether you're a reporter or an editor?
Public apathy. I think the concern that I would have, I often wonder, kind of theoretically, if the people in our country were now in a constitutional convention deciding whether to design a constitution, whether to have a Bill of Rights, would they include freedom of the press? Would they include it as firmly as our current Constitution does? And sometimes I tremble at the answer that I'm afraid I would get. A lot of times you do find people who care only because of the opposite party being in. They don't care as a matter of general principle. And a lot of times, frankly, the public doesn't care. Doesn't appear to care, at least. One of the encouraging parts in this last case that we were in is to have people coming up to you on the street and saying, good luck and we hope you prevail, or after we did, to be congratulatory. But you sometimes wonder if it had gone the other way, would they have felt that way, or would they have gone with the winner, whichever way won the lawsuit? I think that is the great concern.
Why is it important that reporters are free to write what they want to write about?
Well, generally, we're covering news, which is by definition what's happening in the community, and fortunately we haven't had much challenge, not in the past 20 or 30 years, to trying to stop newspapers from printing what they were planning to print. There are plenty of people who complain after it's published because they didn't want the information made known.
Why is it so important that we should be allowed to go in these meetings?
Our view is, and North Carolina's law is, that that the principle of all government is that it's supposed to be open. Government is of the people, by the people, for the people, and so the people should know what's going on. That's true for all levels of government, for your city council, your county commissioners, school boards, in state government, in the legislature, and in Washington. So all levels of government are supposed to be open so that the people are familiar with what's being done in their name and with their tax dollars and with their authority. And so we thought that was very important. Fortunately, the aspect of this case that's the most beneficial is that because it was decided by the state appellate courts, no one in North Carolina is in danger of being sued again over a challenge about either public records or open meetings. That has been established as a statewide precedent. It'll never happen again. That's I guess the silver lining in our great effort is that while it happened to us, it won't happen to anyone else.
And how does that make you feel to know that?
That's encouraging. That makes it a little more worth the price, but that is a great precedent. It's been, I think, very helpful for all newspapers and the public.
The second Sunshine Law is the North Carolina Public Records Law. It states that all government records should be available to the public. But what does that mean? Well, it means that all documents, papers, letters, maps, books, photographs, films, sound recordings, tapes, and electronic data dealing with public business transactions by any part of North Carolina's government should be available to the public. Whew, that's a lot of documents. You might be thinking just about everything the government writes down is a public record. Let's take a closer look. The government is allowed to keep secret a few things: documents about criminal investigations, or the names of witnesses in a trial if they could be in danger. Also, the 911 database, which has everyone's address and phone number in it in case of a national emergency, is a closely guarded secret as well. So what happens if you ask a government official to see one of their records and they say no? Well, you could say something like this: North Carolina's Public Records Law, Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, provides for public inspection and copying of most records made or received by state or local governments. That's a lot of words to say one thing. You and I, by law, have the right to see documents created by our local and state government officials. Discussing Sunshine Laws with us today is Mr. Ben Bradley and a group of our special producers, 5th graders Nigel, Princess, and Casey. Mr. Bradley spent most of his career working for one of America's most influential newspapers, The Washington Post. While he was editor there, one of the most important events in the history of our nation occurred. The president used his powers to break the law. The Washington Post, under Bradley's leadership, brought the story to the American people. History calls it Watergate. Mr. Bradley, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. To begin, what made you want to be a journalist?
Well, I got through with the war, and I had to have a job. I had been I'd done one summer as a 16-year-old on a newspaper in Beverly, Massachusetts, and I thought that looked like a marvelous way to make a living, walk around town and asking people questions. But I found I couldn't get a job around because all the vacancies were being held for returning veterans. And since I wasn't returning to a job, I had to find so I ran into a bunch of guys that were starting a newspaper in New Hampshire, and I joined them.
What do you think is the best part about working in journalism?
Well, it is, if you are a natural curious person and you want to know what's going on, it's a wonderful way, because people understand why you stop them in the street and ask them all sorts of questions, maybe embarrassing, maybe not. But it might be as if you're covering a fire, you're talking to the fire chief, and what started the blaze and stuff like that. Or it might be you're talking to the governor about what he's going to do, and you are like the town crier of old. You were giving the news to the world.
Why are sunshine laws so important?
Well, because if you've got to have information available to you, and if all the good stuff is locked away and somebody's safe, especially the government, how are you going to get it? So I think once a person gets in power, in government especially, they don't want everything known. They certainly don't want their mistakes known. But the people have a right to know their mistakes, because, and the people have a right to know what these people are basing their decisions on and basing their actions on. And it's up to the newspaper people to find out. And sometimes they have found that sunshine laws have been absolutely essential in getting them the access that the society needs.
Casey?
Can you think of a time that sunshine laws helped you cover a story?
Oh, yes. I'm trying to think of a good example. When in the Watergate case, when the President of the United States, in defense of his of Watergate, said that he couldn't tell the people the truth because they involve matters of national security. And when we asked them what matters, what were the matters of national security, they'd say, well, you'd have to ask the Pentagon that, or you'd have to ask that. So we would go to the Pentagon, and if they didn't answer the question, you can actually bring them into court and make them produce a document, and make them, and of course, his case, there weren't any. And that helped us prove that.
Well, we've learned that there are 5 freedoms in the First Amendment: the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the press, and the freedom to assemble, and the freedom to petition the government. So going along with that, Mr. Bradley, how important is it that journalists are protected and are able to write what they want to write about?
Well, their protection isn't absolute. I mean, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire. You can't libel somebody. You can't insult somebody. You really can't lie about anybody. I mean, there are a lot of lies that slip in about, but I think, I think it makes us. It makes us serious. It makes us do right.
Princess.
What is the greatest threat to freedom of the press today?
Greatest threat? Well, I think it's still the various governments who will not reveal the truth, or who will not make available the truth. If you go to a foreign country now, like Iraq, and you're responsible. I mean, you're in essentially an alien environment. You don't generally speak the language, and so you've got to get the government to go to the government and ask them, what's the reason behind this, and they will give you an answer. You've got to decide whether that's true or not, or whether it's true enough, or whether that, and you have to go from him to someone else. Go to the other side, go to the Americans, and see what. It's very interesting. Some of the work is like detective work. You test what they tell you, and eventually you learn who to trust and who not to trust. But even someone that you've been trusting for years, if they get in a jam, then they're liable not to tell you the truth. Very hard to find out. And I think good reporters have a good learn to have an instinctive sense of whether they can trust somebody or whether what you're telling me is true or not, or is even likely to be true.
Mr. Bradley, are there other examples of sunshine laws or the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment that stick out to you that you've used in your history of your job? Or when they came and
Well,
helped you?
I think the laws are just a wonderful, it's a declaration of the press's right to participate in society.
Is there anything else you would like to add about sunshine laws before we wrap up here?
I don't think of sunshine laws every day when I go to work, or I didn't when I was an active reporter or editor. But when you need them, you need them. When some guy says, no, sticks his jaw out at you, you've got to decide how you're going to find out about it. And going to court is a very last resort. First place, it's expensive. And the person who doesn't want to cooperate can just stand his ground and say, I won't do it. So then you have a lawsuit, and that takes forever. It's expensive, and nobody likes that. But you know that your right is on your side, and you can sometimes shame people into talk to their friends and say, get that son of a gun to talk to me.
All right, well, Mr. Bradley, thank you so much for being with us today. And my 5th grade friends, thanks for helping us out and asking questions, and we appreciate everything you've shared with us today. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Great to meet you all. See you in the newspaper someday.
So after a little double checking of the forecast, I think we can call it a sunny day in North Carolina. But let's check back in with our producers one last time.
A sunshine law is a government meeting that is open to the public.
So why is it so important that the sun shines on government documents and in government meetings? Well, the American Society of Newspaper Editors says open meetings and open records mean a better run government. Here's just a few of the reasons sunshine laws help our country. An open government means we are better informed when we go to the polls to vote. An open government gives us more confidence in the work public officials do on our behalf. An open government reduces the risk of corruption and abuse. An open government aids the search for truth and enhances our freedom. No wonder they set aside a week every year to celebrate sunshine laws. Today, sunshine laws are keeping the sun shining in all open meetings where issues important to the people of North Carolina are being discussed. So it's true, North Carolina's forecast is sunny 365 days a year. That's it for me. For Phoenix 14 News and Elon University, I'm Megan Packer. Thanks for joining us for this Sunshine Law Special Report.